The Crixan invasion began without warning. One moment, the skies over major cities around the world were clear, and the next, massive alien ships descended from the heavens, raining down devastation. In the bustling metropolis of New York City, Captain Alexander Williams of the United States Air Force was reviewing training exercises with his squadron when the first reports came in. His heart raced as the severity of the situation became clear. This was no isolated incident, but a coordinated attack on a global scale. All units, scramble immediately. Williams barked into the comms, his voice steady despite the growing panic around him. We have hostile extraterrestrial forces engaging cities across North America. Intercept and engage, but exercise extreme caution. I repeat, this is not a drill. His pilots needed no further prompting. Within minutes, the air was filled with the roar of engines as Williams led his squadron into the fray, streaking towards the towering Crixan vessels that hovered ominously over the city. But their vaunted fighter jets proved no match for the Crixans' advanced technology. Powerful energy beams lanced out, obliterating the human aircraft with ease. Williams could only watch in horror as his comrades were cut down one by one. All units, break off. I repeat, break off, he shouted, banking hard to evade the withering Crixan fire. We cannot penetrate their defenses. Fall back and regroup. As the battered remnants of his squadron retreated, Williams caught a glimpse of the destruction wrought upon the city below. Skyscrapers crumbled, their steel frames twisting and collapsing under the alien bombardment. Plumes of smoke billowed into the sky, obscuring the sun and casting an eerie orange glow over the chaos. My God, Williams muttered, his knuckles white on the flight stick. They're leveling the entire city. Across the river in New Jersey, Dr. Sarah Chen was racing home from her laboratory at the Princeton Institute of Advanced Study. The brilliant physicist had been running late, engrossed in her latest research into alternative energy sources. But as she neared her apartment, the reason for the unusual traffic and panicked expressions on people's faces became terrifyingly clear. Massive alien ships hovered in the sky, their ominous silhouettes blotting out the sun. Bright flashes of light streaked down from the vessels, pulverizing buildings and vehicles in massive explosions. Sarah gripped the steering wheel tightly, her mind racing as she tried to comprehend the scale of the attack. This can't be happening, she murmured, her voice trembling. How is this possible? Gunfire and the wail of emergency sirens filled the air, and Sarah knew she needed to get to safety. But a sense of duty compelled her. If these aliens had the technology to launch such a devastating assault, surely there must be a way to defend against it. As a physicist, she was uniquely positioned to study their weapons and find a countermeasure. Abandoning her car, Sarah sprinted towards the institute, dodging falling debris and panicked crowds. She burst through the doors and raced down the familiar halls, heading straight for her lab. Her colleagues stared at her in bewilderment, but she paid them no heed. We have to analyze those ships, figure out their weaknesses, she shouted, already powering up her equipment. There has to be a way to stop them. Meanwhile, in the ornate halls of the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C., Senator Maria Rodriguez was in the midst of a heated debate on the Senate floor when the first reports of the alien invasion reached her. Mr. President, I must insist that we take immediate action, she cried, rising from her seat. Our cities are under attack, and we cannot afford to waste time arguing. The other senators erupted into a frenzy of shouts and murmurs, many of them too stunned to react. But Rodriguez was not one to be easily cowed. A seasoned political veteran, she had weathered countless crises during her long career, and she was determined not to let this one be the end of her country. Striding to the center of the chamber, Rodriguez raised her hands for silence. Fellow senators, this is a time of extraordinary peril. Our very way of life is under threat, and we must act swiftly and decisively to defend it. Her words carried a sense of urgency that cut through the din, and gradually the chamber fell silent, all eyes turning to the senior senator from California. I am calling for an immediate emergency session of Congress, Rodrigues declared. We must convene our military and scientific leaders, pool our resources, and formulate a coordinated response to this alien invasion. Failure is not an option. The future of our planet hangs in the balance. As the senators erupted into a flurry of activity, Rodrigues allowed herself a brief moment of grim determination. This was no ordinary crisis, and she knew that the decisions made in the coming hours and days would shape the course of human history. But she was ready to meet the challenge head-on, her unwavering resolve fueled by a deep love for her country and a fierce determination to protect it at all costs. Across the devastated cities of America, the human characters found themselves thrust into the heart of a battle for the very survival of their species. The Crixan invasion had caught them off guard, but they were far from defeated. With courage, ingenuity, and an unbreakable will to fight, they would rise to the occasion, determined to defend their home and their way of life against this unprecedented extraterrestrial threat. In the aftermath of the devastating Crixan assault, the initial shock and panic began to give way to a growing determination to fight back. Across the battered cities of America, citizens who had once felt powerless in the face of the alien invaders now found themselves galvanized, ready to take up the mantle of resistance. At the Princeton Institute of Advanced Study, Dr. Sarah Chen worked tirelessly, her brilliant mind racing as she pored over the data collected from the Crixan vessels. Despite the overwhelming firepower of the alien technology, she was convinced that there had to be a weakness, some vulnerability that humanity could exploit. There has to be a way to stop them, she murmured, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she ran simulations and analyzed sensor readings. We can't just sit back and let them destroy us. Nearby, a small group of graduate students and researchers had gathered, drawn by the urgency in Dr. Chen's voice. They listened intently as she outlined her findings, their eyes widening with a mixture of awe and fear. The Crixan ships utilize a form of directed energy weaponry that we've never encountered before, she explained, her brow furrowed in concentration. The power source appears to be some kind of exotic matter, something that defies our current understanding of physics. One of the students, a young woman named Emily, raised her hand tentatively. If we can't match their firepower, how do we fight back? Dr. Chen's lips thinned into a determined smile. That's where we get creative. These ships may be technologically superior, but they're not invincible. We just need to find their weak points and exploit them. Inspired by her words, the group set to work, pooling their knowledge and skills to devise a plan of action. Within hours, they had established a makeshift command center, coordinating with similar resistance movements springing up across the country. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Senator Maria Rodrigues was locked in tense negotiations with the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the President's cabinet. The political landscape had shifted dramatically in the wake of the Crixan assault, and old rivalries and ideological divides were quickly being set aside in the face of the common threat. Gentlemen, we must act quickly, Rodrigues implored, her voice laced with urgency. Every minute we waste is another city destroyed, another life lost. We need to mobilize our military forces and coordinate a global response. The military leaders nodded grimly, their faces etched with the weight of the decisions they faced. Senator, you're right. This is an unprecedented situation, but our conventional weapons have proven ineffective against the Crixan technology. We need to explore alternative options, something that can level the playing field. Rodrigues leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Then that's exactly what we'll do. I want every available scientist, engineer, and technical expert working around the clock to find a solution. We need to tap into the collective ingenuity of this nation and turn it against our enemies. Sensing the senator's determination, the president finally spoke up, his voice grave. You have my full support, Senator. I'm declaring a state of emergency, and I'm granting you the authority to coordinate a national response. Do whatever it takes to stop these aliens and protect our people. Rodrigues nodded, her expression grim but resolute. Thank you, Mr. President. I won't let you down." As the meeting adjourned, Rodriguez strode out of the Oval Office, her mind already racing with a plan of action. She knew that the stakes had never been higher, but she was more than ready to rise to the challenge. With the full weight of the federal government behind her, she would do whatever it took to ensure that humanity emerged victorious from this extraterrestrial onslaught. Across the country, the human resistance movement was gaining momentum, with citizens of all walks of life joining the fight. In the battered streets of New York City, Captain Alexander Williams had regrouped his squadron and was leading them in a series of daring guerrilla strikes against the Crixan forces. "We may not be able to match their firepower, but we can sure as hell make them work for every inch of this city," he growled, his eyes narrowing as he studied the holographic map of the city. "Our goal is to disrupt their operations, tie up their resources, and buy time for the scientists and engineers to find a solution." His pilots nodded, their faces etched with determination. They had witnessed the devastating power of the Crixan invaders firsthand, and they knew that the fate of their planet hung in the balance. But they also knew that they were fighting for something greater than themselves, for the freedom and survival of their species. As they took to the skies, Williams couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. These were no longer just soldiers under his command, but comrades in arms, united in a desperate struggle against an enemy that threatened to extinguish humanity's very existence, and he would do whatever it took to ensure that their sacrifice was not in vain. For in the darkest hour, when all hope seemed lost, the human spirit had risen to the challenge, igniting a flame of resistance that would burn brighter with each passing day. The Crixan had made a grave mistake in underestimating the tenacity and ingenuity of the human race, and they would soon learn the true cost of their invasion. In the aftermath of the devastating Crixan assault, the human resistance movement had begun to coalesce, with citizens across the country rising up to defend their homes and way of life. But even as the guerrilla strikes led by Captain Williams and his squadron began to take a toll on the alien invaders, the gut-wrenching truth remained. Their conventional weapons were simply no match for the Crixans' advanced technology. It was a realization that weighed heavily on the mind of Dr. Sarah Chen as she pored over the data she had collected from the enemy ships. Surrounded by a dedicated team of researchers at the Princeton Institute, the brilliant physicist knew that the key to turning the tide of the war lay in uncovering some hidden vulnerability, a weakness that could be exploited. "There has to be something we're missing," she murmured, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she ran simulations and extrapolated patterns from the sensor readings. "Some component, some source of power that we can target." Her colleagues watched in awe, their expressions a mixture of hope and trepidation. They had witnessed the devastation wrought by the Crixan invaders, and they knew that the fate of their species hung in the balance. But they also trusted in Dr. Chen's abilities, her unparalleled intellect, and her unwavering determination to find a solution. "Wait!" The young graduate student, Emily, suddenly exclaimed, her eyes widening with realization. "The power source. It's not just some exotic matter, is it? There's something else at play here." Dr. Chen's head snapped up, her gaze locking onto Emily's. "Go on," she urged, her voice tinged with a hint of excitement. "The energy readings we're getting, they don't just indicate a unique power source, but something deeper, more fundamental. Something that's been with us since the dawn of our planet." Emily continued, her words tumbling out in a rush. "What if the Crixan have found a way to tap into the very core of the Earth itself?" The realization dawned on Dr. Chen like a flash of lightning, and she felt a chill run down her spine. Of course, the geothermal energy. It's been there all along, waiting to be harnessed. She whirled around, her eyes alight with a newfound determination. "We need to dig deeper, find the source of this ancient power, and find a way to harness it against the Crixan." As the team sprang into action, Dr. Chen knew that time was of the essence. If her theory was correct, the Crixan had already tapped into the Earth's core, using its immense energy to power their devastating weapons. And if humanity had any hope of stopping the alien invasion, They would need to find a way to seize control of this primordial force before the Crixin could fully exploit it. Across the country, in the halls of power in Washington, D.C., Senator Maria Rodriguez was engaged in a flurry of activity, orchestrating a coordinated response to the Crixin threat. She had assembled a team of the brightest scientific minds, drawing from the country's top universities and research institutions, all under the directive to find a way to level the playing field against the alien invaders. "Time is our greatest enemy right now," Rodriguez said, her voice laced with a sense of urgency as she addressed the assembled group. "The Crixin are systematically destroying our cities, and we need to find a way to stop them before it's too late." The scientists nodded, their expressions grim but resolute. They knew the stakes were high, and they were determined to rise to the challenge. "Senator, we've been looking at the data from the Crixin ships, and we believe we've identified a potential weakness," one of the researchers, a renowned physicist named Dr. William Harrington, spoke up. "It seems their power source is drawing directly from the Earth's core, tapping into the immense geothermal energy that lies beneath our feet." Rodriguez's eyes widened with a mixture of hope and trepidation. "If that's the case, then we may have a chance. But how do we harness that power for ourselves?" Dr. Harrington leaned forward, his expression serious. "That's where the challenge lies. The energy at the Earth's core is unlike anything we've ever encountered. It's ancient, primal, and incredibly volatile. Trying to control it directly would be like trying to tame a raging wildfire." The senator's brow furrowed in concentration. "Then we need to find a way to redirect that energy, to turn it against the Crixin. Can it be done?" "It won't be easy," Dr. Harrington admitted. "But if we can locate the precise coordinates of the Crixin's power source and find a way to disrupt their connection to the Earth's core, we may just have a chance of tipping the balance of power in our favor." Rodriguez nodded, her eyes narrowing with determination. "Then that's what we'll do. I want every resource at our disposal focused on this task. We may be facing an enemy with advanced technology, but we have something they don't: the ingenuity and resolve of the human spirit. And that, I believe, will be our greatest weapon." As the meeting adjourned, Rodriguez couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but she was more than ready to face the challenge head-on. The fate of humanity was at stake, and she would do whatever it took to ensure that the Crixin invasion was not the end, but the beginning of a new era, one where the human race would rise up and assert its rightful place in the cosmos. The plan, conceived by Dr. Sarah Chen and her team at Princeton, in collaboration with the scientific task force assembled by Senator Maria Rodriguez in Washington, was audacious, unprecedented, and fraught with risk. But faced with the relentless onslaught of the Crixin invasion, humanity had no choice but to bet everything on a desperate gambit to turn the tide of the war. At the heart of their strategy was the notion that the Crixin's devastating power was derived from a direct connection to the Earth's core, a primordial well of geothermal energy that the alien invaders had somehow managed to tap into and harness for their own destructive purposes. Now the human resistance was determined to seize control of this primal force, using it as a weapon to drive the Crixin from their planet. The first step was to locate the precise coordinates of the Crixin's power source, a task that fell to a team of elite geologists and seismologists working around the clock to map the subterranean network of tectonic activity. Poring over sensor data and satellite imagery, they gradually pieced together a detailed picture of the Crixin's power grid, tracing its intricate web of conduits and energy nodes deep beneath the Earth's surface. As this vital reconnaissance work progressed, Dr. Chen and her colleagues at Princeton set about the monumental challenge of designing a system capable of disrupting the Crixin's connection to the planet's core. Drawing upon their extensive knowledge of physics and engineering, they conceived of a bold plan to essentially create an artificial earthquake, a controlled tectonic event that would sever the aliens' link to the geothermal energy they had been exploiting. The key is to generate a massive pulse of seismic energy, one powerful enough to overwhelm and destabilize the Crixin's power grid, Dr. Chen explained, her eyes alight with a desperate determination. If we can do that, we may just be able to wrest control of the Corps' energy away from them and turn it against their own forces. The sheer scale of the undertaking was staggering, requiring the coordination of thousands of scientists, engineers, and skilled technicians across multiple facilities. Specialized drilling rigs were deployed to key locations around the globe, while teams of experts worked tirelessly to design and construct the complex array of seismic emitters that would form the heart of the system. As the preparations unfolded, the human resistance continued to wage its guerrilla war against the Crixin, Captain Williams and his squadron executing daring strikes to disrupt the invaders' operations and buy precious time for the secret weapon to be completed. Each hard-won victory bolstered the spirit of the people, fueling their determination to see the plan through to its conclusion. Finally, after weeks of frantic activity, the moment of truth arrived. With the Crixin forces massing for a decisive push, the human resistance leadership made the call to activate the seismic weapon. Across the network of emitter stations, the system hummed to life, channeling the immense power of the Earth's core into a colossal pulse of energy. The ground shook with the force of the detonation, the very tectonic plates shifting and groaning under the strain. Seismographs around the world registered the event, and even the Crixin ships in orbit were rocked by the shockwave that reverberated through the planet's crust. As the dust settled, a sense of trepidation hung in the air. Had the plan worked? Had they succeeded in disrupting the Crixin's power source? The answer came swiftly, as the towering alien vessels began to falter, their energy beams flickering and cutting out one by one. "It's working," Dr. Chen cried, her voice tinged with a mix of disbelief and elation. "We've done it. We've found a way to turn the Earth's own power against the Crixin." Across the world, the human resistance erupted into cheers and celebrations, the tide of the war finally beginning to turn in their favor. In the halls of power, Senator Rodriguez watched the unfolding events with a mixture of pride and relief, knowing that the sacrifice and hard work of so many had paid off. "This is just the beginning," she murmured, her gaze hardening with determination. "Now we take the fight to the Crixin and show them the true power of the human spirit." As the Crixin ships faltered and retreated, Captain Williams and his squadron surged forward, their fighters unleashing a devastating barrage of missiles and energy weapons against the vulnerable invaders. The once mighty vessels, stripped of their primary power source, were increasingly easy prey for the human forces, their defensive capabilities crumbling under the relentless assault. In the skies above New York City, Williams gripped the flight stick of his fighter, his jaw set in a determined line. "This is for my comrades," he growled, his finger tightening on the trigger. "For our cities, our families, our planet. We will not be conquered." As the final Crixin ships broke and fled, the human resistance let out a collective roar of triumph, their voices carrying across the scared and battered landscape. The first major victory had been won, but they knew that the fight was far from over. The Crixin would regroup, and they would return, driven by an insatiable desire to subjugate the upstart human race. But in that moment, the people of Earth savored their triumph, their spirits lifted by the knowledge that they had found a way to harness the very power of their planet against the alien invaders. And as they looked to the future, they knew that they were no longer alone in their struggle, that the entire world, united in the face of a common foe, would stand together to defend their home, no matter the cost. With the Crixin's connection to the Earth's core disrupted, the tide of the war began to turn in humanity's favor. Emboldened by their success in activating the secret seismic weapon, the human resistance launched a series of coordinated counterattacks, pushing back against the alien invaders with renewed vigor and determination. Captain Alexander Williams led his squadron of fighter jets in a relentless aerial assault, their newly upgraded weapon systems allowing them to inflict devastating damage on the vulnerable Crixin ships. The once formidable alien vessels, now stripped of their primary power source, proved to be no match for the human pilot's skill and bravery. "Keep the pressure on," Williams shouted into the comms, his eyes narrowed as he maneuvered his fighter through the chaotic dogfights. We have them on the run. Don't let up until every last one of those bastards is out of our skies." Across the globe, similar scenes of human resistance unfolded as citizens rallied to the call. In the ruined streets of New York, Washington, and other battered cities, civilians joined the fight, using improvised weapons and guerrilla tactics to harass and disrupt the Crixan forces. The once invincible alien invaders found themselves beset on all sides, their superior technology proving no match for the sheer determination and ingenuity of the human spirit. At the Princeton Institute, Dr. Sarah Chen and her team continued to work tirelessly, searching for new ways to exploit the Crixans' weaknesses. With the seismic weapon's success, they had gained a crucial foothold, but they knew that the fight was far from over. "We've crippled their primary power source, but they're still a formidable enemy," Chen said, her brow furrowed in concentration as she pored over the latest data. "We need to find a way to neutralize their other systems, their communication networks, their command and control structures. Anything we can use to give us an edge." As the researchers delved deeper into the Crixans' technology, they uncovered a startling revelation. The alien invaders were not a hive-mind entity, as many had assumed, but rather a highly decentralized and autonomous force. Each Crixan ship and outpost appeared to operate independently, with only the loosest of coordination among the various units. "That's it," Dr. Chen exclaimed, her eyes lighting up with a sudden epiphany. "If we can disrupt their communication channels, we might be able to sow chaos within their ranks, turn them against each other." Rapidly, the team set to work, hacking into the Crixans' networks and deploying a series of sophisticated cyber attacks. Viruses and worms spread like wildfire, corrupting the aliens' command systems and causing widespread confusion and disarray. In the skies above the battered cities, the human pilots witnessed the results of these efforts firsthand as the Crixan ships began to turn on one another, their coordinated attacks descending into a chaotic free-for-all. "Keep it up, people," Williams shouted, his voice tinged with a mix of exhilaration and disbelief. "They're falling apart. We've got them on the ropes." As the human resistance continued to press their advantage, Senator Maria Rodriguez and her team in Washington mobilized the full might of the American military, deploying troops, tanks, and heavy artillery to bolster the ground defensive. Coordinating with their allies around the world, they launched a series of simultaneous strikes, overwhelming the Crixan forces with the sheer scale of the human onslaught. "We've waited long enough," Rodriguez said, her expression grim but determined. "It's time to take the fight to the Crixan and show them the true power of our species." The ensuing battles were fierce and bloody, with both sides fighting tooth and nail for every inch of ground. But with the Crixans' primary power source crippled and their communication networks in disarray, the human forces slowly began to gain the upper hand. In the skies above New York, Captain Williams and his squadron engaged in a desperate dogfight, their upgraded fighters darting and weaving through the chaos as they blasted away at the Crixan ships. The alien vessels, once so unstoppable, now struggled to maintain cohesion, their movements erratic and uncoordinated. "Keep it together, people," Williams barked, his fingers dancing across the controls as he lined up his next target. "This is our moment. Don't let them get away." With a thunderous roar, his missiles streaked towards the Crixan ship, tearing through its weakened defenses and sending it plummeting to the ground in a fiery explosion. Across the city, similar scenes unfolded as the human resistance pushed the invaders back, reclaiming their cities and restoring a sense of hope to the battered populace. As the Crixan forces retreated, the people of Earth let out a collective cheer, their voices carrying across the scared and battered landscape. The tide of the war had turned, and they knew that this was just the beginning of their fight for freedom. But even as they savored their hard-won victory, a sense of unease crept into the hearts of the human leaders. They knew that the Crixan would not be content to simply abandon their conquest. They would regroup, they would return, and they would bring the full force of their might to bear upon the upstart human race. And so, as the smoke cleared and the dust settled, The people of Earth braced themselves for the next phase of the war, their determination hardened by the knowledge that they had tasted the sweet fruits of victory, and that they would fight to the last to defend their home and their way of life. The tide of the war had turned, and the Crixan invaders were in full retreat. Across the globe, the human resistance watched with a mix of disbelief and triumph as the towering alien vessels began to flee, their once formidable power broken by the ingenious efforts of the scientific and military leaders who had orchestrated the counterattack. In the skies above New York City, Captain Alexander Williams and his squadron of fighter pilots pressed the advantage, their upgraded weapon systems carving a path of destruction through the retreating Crixan forces. The alien ships, now stripped of their primary power source and struggling to maintain cohesion, proved easy targets for the skilled human pilots. "Keep it up, people," Williams shouted into the comms, his voice tinged with a sense of exhilaration. "Don't let them regroup. We've got them on the run." The once invincible Crixan vessels, now reduced to erratic and vulnerable targets, buckled under the relentless barrage of missiles and energy weapons. One by one, they tumbled from the sky, their hulls breaking apart as they crashed to the ground in spectacular displays of destruction. On the ground, the human resistance fighters cheered and embraced, their spirits lifted by the knowledge that their planet had been delivered from the brink of conquest. In the ruined streets, citizens emerged from their shelters, their faces etched with a mixture of relief and disbelief. "We did it," a young woman whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "We actually did it." Across the country, similar scenes unfolded as the Crixan retreat became a rout. In Washington, D.C., Senator Maria Rodriguez watched the unfolding events with a grim sense of satisfaction, her expression softening as she witnessed the outpouring of joy and relief from the American people. "This is just the beginning," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the sounds of celebration. "The Crixan will regroup, and they will come back. But we've shown them that we will not go down without a fight." At the Princeton Institute, Dr. Sarah Chen and her team of researchers huddled around their monitors, their expressions a mix of triumph and trepidation. The seismic weapon they had designed, the one that had disrupted the Crixan's connection to the Earth's core, had proven to be the key to turning the tide of the war. But they knew that the invaders would not be deterred easily. "They'll be back," Chen said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "And next time, they'll be ready for us." The team nodded grimly, their minds already racing to devise new strategies and technologies that could give humanity an edge against the alien threat. They had tasted victory, but they knew that the war was far from over. As the days turned into weeks, the Crixan retreat continued, the alien vessels fleeing from the relentless onslaught of the human forces. Captain Williams and his squadron pressed the advantage, their fighters darting and weaving through the skies as they hunted down the retreating invaders. "They're running scared," Williams observed, a grim smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "We've broken their will to fight." But even as the human resistance celebrated their hard-won victories, a sense of unease crept into their hearts. They knew that the Crixan would not simply accept defeat. They would regroup, they would lick their wounds, and they would return with a vengeance. And so, as the last of the Crixan ships disappeared over the horizon, the people of Earth braced themselves for the inevitable counterattack. They had tasted the sweet fruits of victory, but they knew that the true test of their resilience was yet to come. In the halls of power, Senator Rodriguez convened emergency meetings with world leaders, forging a global alliance to coordinate the defense of their shared home. They would need to pool their resources, their expertise, and their collective will to overcome the formidable threat posed by the Crixan invaders. "This is a battle for the very survival of our species," Rodriguez declared, her gaze sweeping across the assembled dignitaries. "We cannot afford to let our guard down, not for a single moment. The Crixan will return, and when they do, we must be ready." The leaders nodded, their expressions grim but resolute. They had witnessed the devastation wrought by the initial Crixan assault, and they knew that the fate of their world hung in the balance. But they also knew that they had tapped into a wellspring of human ingenuity and determination, a force that had proven capable of turning the tide of the war. And so, as the last of the Crixan ships vanished into the distance, the people of Earth steeled themselves for the battles to come, their spirits buoyed by the knowledge that they had already proven their ability to stand against the overwhelming might of an extraterrestrial foe. The road ahead would be long and arduous, but they were ready to face it head-on, united in their determination to defend their home and their way of life. In the aftermath of the Crixan retreat, the people of Earth were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. The devastation wrought by the alien invasion was staggering, with entire cities reduced to rubble and countless lives lost. But even as the scale of the destruction sank in, a sense of renewed determination and resilience began to take root. Captain Alexander Williams stood amidst the ruins of New York City, his gaze sweeping across the once vibrant metropolis. The skyscrapers that had once pierced the sky now lay in crumbled heaps, their twisted steel frames a haunting reminder of the Crixans' relentless assault. Yet, even in the face of such overwhelming loss, the captain could see the first signs of recovery. "We'll rebuild," he murmured, his voice low and resolute. "Piece by piece, we'll bring this city back to life." Around him, his squadron of pilots were already mobilizing, coordinating with the National Guard and local authorities to clear debris and establish supply lines. Their once sleek fighter jets had been battered and scarred by the fierce battles, but the pilots had refused to let them be grounded. They knew that their skills and their machines would be needed in the days and weeks to come. Across the city, similar scenes were unfolding as the people of Earth set about the monumental task of rebuilding their shattered world. In the halls of power, Senator Maria Rodriguez and her counterparts from around the globe were locked in a flurry of activity, working to coordinate the global effort. "We've won the first battle, but the war is far from over," Rodriguez said, her expression grim but determined. "The Crixan will return, and we must be ready to meet them head-on." To that end, the senator had spearheaded the creation of a new international organization, a united front that would harness the collective resources and expertise of the world's nations. Its purpose was twofold: to oversee the reconstruction of the devastated regions, and to develop new technologies and strategies that could give humanity an edge against the Crixan invaders. At the Princeton Institute, Dr. Sarah Chen and her team of researchers were at the forefront of this effort, their minds racing to uncover new insights and innovations that could turn the tide of the war. They had already made significant strides in understanding the Crixans' technology, and now they were focused on finding ways to amplify and improve upon the seismic weapon that had proven so effective in the previous battle. "We can't just rely on the same trick twice," Chen said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "The Crixan will be expecting that, and they'll have countermeasures ready. We need to stay one step ahead of them." As the weeks turned into months, the global reconstruction effort began to take shape. Across the devastated regions, towering cranes and bustling construction sites became a common sight as cities slowly rose from the ashes. The people of Earth, their spirits invigorated by their hard-won victory, threw themselves into the work with a newfound sense of purpose. Yet, even as the physical scars of the invasion began to heal, the emotional toll remained. Families mourned the loss of loved ones, and communities grappled with the trauma of the Crixans' assault. But in the face of this adversity, a renewed sense of unity and togetherness emerged, as the people of Earth banded together to support one another and rebuild their shared home. In the halls of power, Senator Rodriguez and her colleagues continued to work tirelessly, forging diplomatic ties and coordinating the global defense strategy. They knew that the Crixan would return, and they were determined to be ready. "We've seen what they're capable of," Rodriguez said, her voice unwavering. "But we've also seen what we can do when we come together. This time, we won't be caught off guard. We'll be waiting for them, and we'll be ready to fight." As the months turned into years, the reconstruction effort slowly but surely began to bear fruit. Across the world, cities rose from the rubble, their skylines once again piercing the horizon. The scars of the Crixan invasion remained, but they were testament to the human spirit's indomitable resilience. And in the laboratories and research facilities scattered across the globe, the work of the brightest minds continued unabated. New technologies were developed, new strategies were conceived, and the world prepared itself for the inevitable return of the Crixan invaders. For in the hearts and minds of the people of Earth, a new determination had taken root, a determination to never again be caught unawares, to never again be cowed by the overwhelming might of an extraterrestrial foe. They had tasted victory once, and they knew that they could do it again. And as the world rebuilt, as the wounds of the past began to heal, the people of Earth steeled themselves for the battles to come, their eyes fixed firmly on the horizon, waiting for the day when they would once again be called upon to defend their home and their way of life. As the years passed and the scars of the Crixan invasion began to heal, the people of Earth found themselves standing at the precipice of a new era. The hard-fought victories of the past had not only driven the alien invaders from their shores, but had also forged a sense of unity and purpose that had eluded humanity for centuries. In the halls of the newly formed Global Defense Initiative, Senator Maria Rodriguez stood tall, her weathered face etched with a quiet pride. The organization she had helped to establish had grown into a formidable force, a testament to the indomitable spirit of the human race. "We've come a long way," she murmured, her gaze sweeping across the bustling command center. "When the Crixan first attacked, we were caught off guard, unprepared to face such a formidable adversary. But now we stand united, our resolve strengthened by the trials we've endured." Beside her, Captain Alexander Williams nodded in agreement, his expression solemn. The once bold fighter pilot had seen his fair share of hardship and loss, but his determination had only been burnished by the fires of war. "We learned a hard lesson that day," he said, his voice low and measured. "We learned that we can no longer afford to be complacent, to take our safety and our way of life for granted. The Crixan have shown us that there are forces in this universe that seek to subjugate us, to strip us of our freedom. And we will never let that happen again." It was a sentiment shared by the entire human race, a collective resolve that had been forged in the crucible of the Crixan invasion. In the years since the final retreat of the alien invaders, the nations of the world had come together in a way that had never been seen before, pooling their resources, their knowledge, and their collective will to safeguard the future of their species. At the Princeton Institute, Dr. Sarah Chen and her team of researchers continued to push the boundaries of scientific understanding, their work fueled by a sense of urgency and a deep-seated desire to give humanity an edge in the battles to come. The seismic weapon they had developed during the initial conflict had been but the first step, a proof of concept that had paved the way for even more powerful and sophisticated technologies. "We can't afford to rest on our laurels," Chen said, her brow furrowed in concentration as she pored over the latest data. "The Crixan will return, and when they do, we need to be ready. We need to push the limits of what we thought was possible, to create weapons and defenses that can stand up to their might." And across the globe, the people of Earth heeded the call, pouring their time, their resources, and their collective ingenuity into the task of fortifying their defenses. New military installations sprouted up, housing the latest in cutting-edge weaponry and defensive systems. Research facilities expanded, their laboratories buzzing with the activity of brilliant minds working to uncover the secrets of the Crixan's technology. It was a remarkable transformation, one that had been born out of the ashes of a devastating conflict. Where once there had been division and strife, now there was a sense of purpose and unity, a shared determination to ensure that the Crixan's invasion would be the last attempt to subjugate the human race. "We are no longer just citizens of individual nations," Rodriguez proclaimed, her voice ringing out with a newfound authority. "We are citizens of the world, bound together by a common purpose and a shared destiny. And we will not be defeated, not by any force, human or alien, that dares to threaten our freedom and our way of life." The assembled leaders, representatives from every corner of the globe, erupted into thunderous applause, their expressions alight with a renewed sense of pride and purpose. They knew that the road ahead would not be an easy one, that the Crixen were a formidable enemy who would stop at nothing to achieve their goals. But they also knew that they were no longer alone, that the entire human race stood united in its resolve to defend its home. And as the world continued to rebuild, to fortify its defenses, and prepare for the inevitable return of the Crixen, a sense of cautious optimism began to take root. For the people of Earth had seen what they were capable of when they came together, when they harnessed the full power of their ingenuity and determination. And they knew, in their hearts, that they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. In the skies above, the contrails of humanity's newest generation of fighter jets crisscrossed the heavens, a testament to the technological advancements that had been made in the wake of the Crixen invasion. And as the people of Earth looked to the future, they knew that they were no longer just inhabitants of a single planet, but pioneers on the cusp of a new era, one where the human race would take its rightful place among the stars, united and unwavering in its resolve to defend its freedom and its destiny.